Baby deer seeks comfort in a child. Their friendship is unforgettable. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. Lily loved spending her mornings in the backyard, a vast stretch of green bordered by the dense forest that seemed to stretch endlessly beyond the horizon. At just 3 years old, Lily's world was full of wonder. Every flower, every bird, and every rustling leaf held a story she longed to uncover. Her parents often watched her from the kitchen window, marveling at her boundless curiosity. On this particular morning, the air was crisp, and the sunlight streamed through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Lily was kneeling in the grass, examining a line of ants marching purposefully toward a fallen apple. She giggled softly, her small hands clapping in delight as she followed their trail. But something unusual happened. From the edge of the forest, a faint rustling sound broke the calm. Lily looked up, her wide blue eyes scanning the tree line. For a moment, everything was still. Then, emerging hesitantly from the shadows, a small, trembling figure stepped into the sunlight. It was a baby deer. The fawn's delicate legs wobbled as it stepped cautiously onto the soft grass. Its fur was a warm brown, dotted with white spots that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Its large, dark eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity as it glanced around, its ears twitching at every sound. Lily's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. She stayed perfectly still, her heart pounding with excitement. She had seen deer before, but never this close, and never one so small and vulnerable. The fawn took another step, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. It seemed to sense that this place was safe, that the little girl sitting in the grass posed no threat. Slowly, hesitantly, it began to move closer. From the kitchen, Lily's mother, Sarah, noticed the scene unfolding in the yard. "Tom," she called to her husband, her voice a mixture of amazement and concern. "Come look at this." Tom joined her at the window, his eyebrows raising in surprise. "Is that a deer?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "A baby deer, and it looks like it's coming right up to Lily." They watched as the fawn approached their daughter, its steps cautious but steady. Lily, sensing the need for gentleness, extended a small hand toward the creature. "Hi," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Lily." The fawn stopped a few feet away, its ears flicking nervously, but Lily's calm demeanor seemed to reassure it. After a moment's hesitation, it took the final steps toward her, lowering its head to sniff her outstretched hand. Sarah and Tom exchanged a look. "What do we do?" Tom asked. "Nothing," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. "Just let them be." Lily was overjoyed. The fawn's nose was soft and cool against her hand, and she could feel its quick, shallow breaths. She giggled softly, resisting the urge to move too suddenly. "You're so pretty," she said, her voice full of awe. "What's your name?" Of course, the fawn didn't respond, but Lily decided to name it anyway. "I'll call you Spot," she declared, glancing at the white dots on its back. "Do you like that?" Spot tilted its head, as if considering the question. Then it let out a soft, high-pitched bleat, which Lily took as agreement. "Spot it is," she said with a grin. Spot stayed close to Lily, his fragile legs trembling less with each passing moment. The two of them seemed to exist in their own little world, a space where trust and curiosity bridged the gap between species. Lily gently patted Spot's soft fur, her tiny hands careful not to startle him. The fawn, though hesitant at first, gradually relaxed, its large, expressive eyes gazing at her with a mix of wonder and gratitude. Sarah and Tom, still watching from the window, couldn't believe what they were seeing. "It's like they've known each other forever," Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with emotion. Tom nodded. "I've never seen anything like it. She has a way with animals, doesn't she?" "She always has," Sarah replied. "But this is different." Over the next few hours, Spot became a fixture in the backyard. He followed Lily as she explored, his thin legs wobbling slightly as he tried to keep up. Lily showed him her favorite spots, the small patch of daisies near the fence, the bird bath that sparkled in the sunlight, and the corner where she liked to dig for worms. Spot seemed to take it all in, his head tilting inquisitively at each new discovery. When lunchtime rolled around, Sarah called Lily inside. "Come on, sweetheart. It's time to eat." Lily turned to Spot, her face full of concern. "Can Spot come too?" she asked. Sarah smiled gently. "Spot can't come inside, sweetie. He belongs outside in the forest." "But he's scared," Lily said, her lower lip trembling. "He doesn't want to go back." Sarah crouched down to Lily's level, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know he's scared, but he'll be okay. The forest is his home. He just needs some time to feel safe again." Lily frowned but nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but can I bring him something to eat?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Just something small like an apple." "Deer like apples." Lily brightened at the idea. She grabbed an apple from the kitchen counter, her little hands clutching it tightly as she ran back outside. Spot was waiting for her, his ears perking up when he saw her approach. "Here, Spot," Lily said, holding out the apple. "It's for you." Spot sniffed the fruit cautiously before taking a tentative bite. Lily giggled as the fawn's small teeth crunched through the apple, juice dribbling down its chin. "You like it?" she exclaimed, clapping her hands. Over the next few days, Spot became a regular visitor to the backyard. He would appear in the mornings, stepping out of the forest with hesitant but determined strides. Lily would greet him with an excited wave, and the two of them would spend hours together, exploring and playing. Lily's parents watched the budding friendship with a mix of amazement and caution. While they were touched by the bond their daughter had formed with the fawn, they knew it wasn't a permanent arrangement. Spot was a wild animal, and eventually he would need to return to the forest. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Lily and Spot chase each other around the yard, Tom voiced his concerns. "What happens when Spot's mother comes back?" he asked. "Or when he decides to leave?" Sarah sighed, her gaze fixed on Lily's joyful face. "I don't know, but I think we need to let this run its course. For now, it's good for both of them. Lily's learning so much about kindness and responsibility, and Spot is finding comfort and safety." Tom nodded but remained thoughtful. "We'll have to prepare her for the possibility of saying goodbye." Lily, oblivious to her parents' concerns, continued to enjoy every moment with Spot. She brought him treats, apples, carrots, and even a handful of lettuce she had borrowed from the kitchen. She showed him her toys, holding them up for him to see and explaining their names and purposes as though he could understand. One day, she decided Spot needed a toy of his own. She rummaged through her collection and found a small stuffed bunny with floppy ears. "This is for you," she told Spot, holding the toy out to him. "You can cuddle with it when you're scared." Spot sniffed the bunny curiously, his nose twitching. He didn't play with it the way Lily had hoped, but he seemed content to let it sit beside him as they lounged in the grass. As word of the unusual friendship spread, neighbors began to take notice. Some were charmed by the story of the little girl and her deer, while others expressed concerns about safety and the potential consequences of allowing a wild animal to get so close to humans. One neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, was particularly vocal. "It's not safe," he told Tom one afternoon. "What if the deer gets spooked and hurts her? Or what if it becomes too dependent on humans and can't survive in the wild?" Tom listened patiently, though he felt defensive of Lily and Spot's bond. "We're being careful," he assured Mr. Jenkins. "We're teaching Lily to respect Spot's space, and we're not trying to domesticate him. He still spends most of his time in the forest." Mr. Jenkins shook his head. "I just hope you know what you're doing. Wild animals belong in the wild." Tom nodded, his jaw tightening. He knew Mr. Jenkins had a point, but he also believed in the value of what Lily and Spot were sharing. "We'll keep that in mind," he said diplomatically. Later that evening, Tom and Sarah sat down with Lily to have a gentle conversation about Spot. "Sweetheart," Sarah began, "we need to talk about Spot. You've been such a good friend to him. But we have to remember that he's a wild animal." Lily's brow furrowed. "But he's my friend." "I know he is," Sarah said, her voice soft, and he'll always be your friend. But someday, Spot's mom might come back to find him. And when that happens, he'll need to go back to the forest where he belongs. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. But what if he doesn't want to go? Tom reached over to hold her small hand. Spot loves spending time with you, but he's also learning how to be strong and independent. That's what animals do. They grow up and take care of themselves. And you've helped him get ready for that. Lily sniffled, her lower lip quivering. But I'll miss him. We'll all miss him, Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a hug. But you've given him so much love, and he'll carry that with him forever. That night, Lily lay in bed clutching her favorite stuffed animal, her thoughts filled with Spot. She couldn't imagine her days without him, but she also didn't want to stop him from being happy. I just want you to be safe, she whispered, as though Spot could hear her. Out in the forest, Spot curled up beneath a cluster of bushes. The stuffed bunny Lily had given him tucked beside him. The connection between them was unspoken but undeniable. A bond that transcended words and would leave a lasting mark on both their lives. The days passed with a bittersweet edge. Lily and Spot continued to share their time together in the backyard. But Lily couldn't shake the lingering thought of having to say goodbye. She tried to ignore it, instead focusing on making the most of every moment. She taught Spot how to nudge a ball with his nose and giggled uncontrollably when he clumsily rolled it back to her. She even made up songs about their adventures, singing them softly as they sat side by side. Spot, for his part, seemed to sense the unease in Lily's heart. He stayed close to her, resting his head on her lap or following her wherever she went. His trust in her was unwavering, and Lily found comfort in the gentle way he looked at her with his large, soulful eyes. One crisp morning, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, Spot didn't appear in the yard at his usual time. Lily stood at the edge of the forest, calling his name softly. "Spot, are you there?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. But there was no response. The forest was quiet, save for the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. Lily's heart sank as she waited, hoping to see Spot's familiar figure emerge from the trees. When he didn't, she turned and trudged back to the house, her shoulders slumped. Sarah noticed her daughter's somber expression. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, kneeling down to meet Lily's eyes. "Spot didn't come today," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he's okay?" Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder. "I'm sure he's fine, sweetie. Maybe he's just exploring the forest. That's his home after all." Lily nodded, though the worry in her chest remained. "I hope he comes back soon." Meanwhile, Spot was deep in the forest, following a faint but familiar scent. It was his mother's scent, carried to him on the breeze. Spot had been separated from her for weeks, and though he had grown more confident and independent, the instinct to find her had never faded. The journey was not easy. Spot navigated through thick underbrush, crossed shallow streams, and avoided the watchful eyes of predators. But he was determined, driven by the hope of reuniting with the one who had cared for him since birth. After hours of searching, Spot's persistence paid off. He spotted a small herd of deer grazing in a clearing, and among them was his mother. Her head lifted as she caught sight of him, and for a moment, they both stood still, staring at each other. Then, with a burst of energy, Spot bounded toward her, his heart racing with joy. His mother nuzzled him affectionately, her relief palpable. The other deer in the herd watched with mild curiosity, but Spot only had eyes for his mother. For the first time in weeks, Spot felt a sense of completeness. He was back where he belonged. The next day, Lily sat on the back porch, her chin resting in her hands. She missed Spot terribly and couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. "Do you think he's coming back?" she asked her father as he joined her with a cup of coffee. Tom hesitated before answering. "I think Spot's found his way back to his herd," he said gently. "But that doesn't mean he's forgotten about you. He'll always remember the kindness you showed him." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "But I didn't get to say goodbye." Tom wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes we don't get to say goodbye the way we want to, but you gave Spot a gift he'll carry with him forever." And that's more important than any goodbye. Lily nodded, though her heart still ached. She decided to write a letter to Spot, even if she couldn't give it to him. She grabbed a piece of paper and a crayon, pouring her feelings onto the page. "Dear Spot," she wrote in her careful, childish handwriting. "I hope you're happy in the forest with your family. I miss you a lot, but I'm glad you're safe. Thank you for being my friend. Love, Lily." Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to normal. Lily continued to play in the backyard, but it wasn't the same without Spot. She often glanced toward the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, but he never appeared. Then, one afternoon, as she was sitting by the garden with her stuffed animals, a familiar rustling sound caught her attention. Her heart leapt as she turned toward the forest, and there, standing at the edge of the trees, was Spot. "Spot!" she cried, jumping to her feet. She ran toward him, her face lighting up with pure joy. Spot stepped into the yard, his movements calm and confident. He had grown in the weeks since Lily had last seen him, his legs sturdier and his eyes brighter. But there was no mistaking the recognition in his gaze as he approached her. Lily wrapped her arms around Spot's neck, tears streaming down her face. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I was so scared you wouldn't come back." Spot nuzzled her cheek gently, his soft breath warm against her skin. It was his way of saying, "I'm here. I didn't forget." Lily's parents watched from the porch, their hearts swelling at the sight of the reunion. "He came back," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. Tom nodded. "I guess some bonds are too strong to break." For the rest of the afternoon, Lily and Spot played together as if no time had passed. Lily showed him the new flowers that had bloomed in the garden and told him all about the things she had done while he was gone. Spot listened patiently, his quiet presence a source of comfort and joy. When evening came, Spot stood at the edge of the yard, looking back at Lily one last time before disappearing into the forest. Lily watched him go, her heart full but aching. She knew he couldn't stay, but she was grateful for the chance to see him again. From that day on, Spot's visits became less frequent. Lily understood that he was growing up and needed to be with his herd, but she cherished every moment they spent together. Each time he appeared, she greeted him with the same joy and love, knowing that their bond would never fade. Lily's parents were proud of the way she handled the changes. They saw how much she had grown, her understanding and compassion deepening with each passing day. "She's learning so much from Spot," Sarah said one evening as they watched Lily from the porch. "It's incredible," Tom nodded. "She's always had a big heart." Spot just helped her realize how powerful it is. As the seasons changed and the leaves began to fall, Lily spent more time indoors, drawing pictures of her adventures with Spot. Her favorite drawing was of the two of them sitting under the big oak tree in the backyard, their heads close together. She taped it to the wall above her bed, where it would always remind her of their special bond. One night, as Lily drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of Spot running through the forest, his legs strong and his spirit free. In her dream, he stopped to look back at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. Lily smiled in her sleep, knowing that their friendship would always be a part of her. As winter settled in, the forest surrounding Lily's home transformed into a serene, snow-covered wonderland. The once lush greenery was now blanketed in white, and the quiet stillness of the season brought a new kind of magic to the landscape. Lily often stood at the window, watching the snow fall and wondering how Spot was doing. She imagined him nestled with his herd, keeping warm and safe. "Do you think Spot is okay in the snow?" she asked her mother one afternoon as they baked cookies together. Sarah smiled gently. "I think Spot is doing just fine, sweetheart. Deer are very good at surviving in the winter. They stick together and help each other find food and shelter." Lily nodded, reassured by her mother's words. But she couldn't help wishing she could see Spot, even just for a moment, to know for sure that he was safe. One morning, as Lily was playing with her toys by the fire, a knock came at the door. Sarah opened it to find their neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, standing on the porch with a thick scarf wrapped around his neck. "Good morning, Sarah," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. "I just thought I'd let you know. I saw a group of deer in the meadow behind my house yesterday. One of them looked a lot like Spot. Sarah's eyes lit up. Thank you for telling me, Mr. Jenkins. Lily will be so happy to hear that. Mr. Jenkins nodded. I figured she'd want to know. It's good to see him doing well. That little one's stronger than I gave him credit for. As Mr. Jenkins walked away, Sarah closed the door and turned to Lily. Guess what, sweetie, she said, her voice filled with excitement. Mr. Jenkins saw Spot yesterday. He's with his herd, and he looks happy and healthy. Lily's face lit up, and she clapped her hands. Really? Spot's okay. He's more than okay, Sarah said, kneeling to hug her daughter. He's growing up just like you. The news brought a sense of peace to Lily. Knowing that Spot was thriving in the wild made her heart feel light, and she began to embrace the idea that their time together, though brief, had been a gift. She continued to draw pictures of Spot, filling her notebook with scenes of their adventures and her imaginings of his life in the forest. One evening, as Lily and her parents decorated the Christmas tree, she hung a small ornament shaped like a deer on one of the branches. This is for Spot, she said, smiling up at the sparkling lights. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder. I think Spot would love that, Lily. As they finished decorating the tree, the family stood back to admire their work. The living room was filled with warmth and light, and for a moment, Lily felt as though Spot were right there with them, his gentle presence a part of their celebration. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and the forest began to awaken from its slumber. The snow melted, revealing patches of green, and the air was filled with the songs of returning birds. Lily eagerly explored the backyard, searching for signs of new life. She found tiny buds on the trees, fresh sprouts pushing through the soil, and the tracks of animals that had ventured close to the house. One sunny afternoon, as Lily played near the edge of the forest, she heard a familiar rustling sound. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned toward the noise, and there, stepping out of the trees, was Spot. Spot! Lily cried, her voice filled with joy. She ran to him, her arms outstretched. Spot had grown taller over the winter, his legs sturdy and his spots fading into a smooth brown coat. But his eyes were the same, bright, warm, and full of recognition. He nuzzled Lily's hand, his soft nose brushing against her palm. You came back, Lily said, hugging him tightly. I missed you so much. Sarah and Tom watched from the porch, their faces glowing with happiness. He always comes back, Sarah said softly, her voice filled with emotion. Tom nodded. They've got something special, those two. It's not every day you see a bond like that. For the rest of the afternoon, Lily and Spot roamed the yard together, just like they had before. Lily told Spot all about her winter adventures, and though he couldn't understand her words, he listened intently, his ears twitching with every rise and fall of her voice. When the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the forest, Spot turned to leave. Lily watched him go, her heart full of gratitude. Bye, Spot, she called after him. Come back soon, okay? Spot paused at the edge of the trees, looking back at her one last time before disappearing into the forest. As the seasons continued to change, Spot's visits became less frequent, but they never stopped completely. Each time he appeared, it felt like a gift, a reminder of the bond they shared and the lessons Lily had learned from their friendship. Lily grew older, her world expanding as she started school and made new friends. But she never forgot Spot or the time they had spent together. She often told her classmates stories about the baby deer who had become her best friend, and her drawings of Spot filled the pages of her notebooks. One day, her teacher assigned the class a project on animals and their habitats. Lily chose to write about deer, drawing on everything she had learned from her time with Spot. She carefully described their behavior, their diet, and the importance of preserving their natural habitats. At the end of her report, she included a drawing of Spot standing in the forest, his gentle eyes watching over the world around him. Years later, as a young adult, Lily found herself drawn to the field of wildlife conservation. Inspired by her bond with Spot, she dedicated her life to protecting animals and their habitats. She studied tirelessly, earning a degree in environmental science and joining a team of conservationists working to protect endangered species. Lily often thought of Spot as she worked, his memory a constant source of motivation. She carried a small photo of one of her childhood drawings in her wallet, a simple sketch of her and Spot sitting together under the oak tree. It was a reminder of where her journey had begun and the impact that one small deer had on her life. One crisp autumn morning, Lily returned to her childhood home for a visit. The backyard looked much the same, though the trees were taller and the garden was now overgrown with wildflowers. She stood at the edge of the forest, gazing into the trees and wondering if Spot was still out there, living his life in the wild. As she stood there, a movement in the distance caught her eye. A group of deer emerged from the trees, their graceful forms moving silently through the underbrush. Among them was an older doe, her coat speckled with gray. Lily's heart swelled as the doe paused, looking directly at her. Though years had passed, there was something familiar in the way the doe held herself, in the calm intelligence of her gaze. Lily smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carried by the wind. "For everything." The doe watched her for a moment longer before turning and disappearing into the forest. Lily stood there, her heart full of gratitude and wonder. She knew that the bond she had shared with Spot would stay with her forever, a testament to the power of kindness, trust, and the unforgettable friendship between a child and a baby deer. Lily stayed at the edge of the forest for a long time after the deer disappeared from sight. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that even after all these years, the connection she had with Spot, and perhaps now his family, remained alive in her heart. Returning to her childhood home had rekindled memories she thought were distant, bringing her closer to her roots and the experiences that had shaped her. The next morning, over breakfast, Lily shared her encounter with her parents. Tom's eyes lit up as she described the doe's calm gaze and the feeling that she somehow knew it was Spot's family. "Do you think it could have been him?" Lily asked, her voice filled with quiet hope. Tom leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It's hard to say," he admitted, "but even if it wasn't Spot himself, it's clear that his spirit still lives in these woods. The connection you had with him has left a mark on you and maybe even on them." Sarah reached across the table to squeeze Lily's hand. "Some bonds are so strong, they echo through time. Whether it was Spot or not, you'll always carry him with you." The visit to her childhood home reminded Lily of how much her friendship with Spot had shaped her life. As she returned to her work in wildlife conservation, she carried that renewed sense of purpose with her. She began focusing on programs that encourage children to connect with nature, believing that fostering such bonds early on could inspire the next generation of environmental stewards. One of her first projects was a children's book titled Spot and Me, A Friendship in the Forest. The book was a heartfelt retelling of her experiences with Spot, written in simple, poetic language that young readers could understand. She included her own illustrations, capturing moments like Spot's first hesitant steps into the backyard and their games beneath the oak tree. When the book was published, it received an outpouring of love from readers of all ages. Parents wrote to Lily, sharing how the story had sparked their children's curiosity about nature. Teachers used the book in their classrooms, encouraging students to explore the outdoors and think about their relationship with animals. At one of the book's readings, a little boy named Ethan approached Lily with wide, curious eyes. He held a crumpled drawing of a deer in his small hands, clearly inspired by the story he had just heard. "Is Spot real?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily crouched down to his level, smiling warmly. "He was very real to me," she said, "and even though he had to go back to the forest, he stayed in my heart. That's what made him special." Ethan nodded solemnly, clutching his drawing tighter. "I think I want to help animals too, just like you." Lily's heart swelled at his words. "That's a wonderful idea, Ethan. Animals need people like you who care about them." As Ethan walked away, Lily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Spot's legacy was continuing to inspire, just as she had hoped. Years later, Lily's work expanded beyond her wildest dreams. She founded an organization called Forest Friends, dedicated to protecting wildlife and educating communities about the importance of coexistence with nature. The organization hosted events, built wildlife corridors, and worked with schools to develop outdoor education programs. Through it all, Lily kept Spot's memory close. A framed illustration of him hung in her office, a constant reminder of the small deer who had changed her life. Every decision she made, every project she led, was driven by the lessons she had learned from their friendship. One day, while leading a group of volunteers on a reforestation project, Lily found herself standing in a clearing that reminded her of the meadow near her childhood home. The air was filled with the sound of birdsong, and the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the ground. She closed her eyes, letting the moment wash over her. When she opened her eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. At the edge of the clearing, a young fawn stood watching her. Its coat was a rich brown, speckled with the same white spots that Spot had once had. The fawn's dark eyes were wide and curious, and for a moment, it felt as though time had turned back. Lily didn't move, not wanting to startle the fawn. She simply stood there, her heart pounding as she met its gaze. The fawn tilted its head, its ears flicking, before slowly stepping forward. It stopped a few feet away, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. A soft smile spread across Lily's face. "Hello there," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You remind me of someone very special." The fawn stood still for a moment longer before bounding away, disappearing into the trees. Lily watched it go, her heart full of gratitude. It was as if the forest itself had given her a gift, a reminder that the connections we make with nature are never truly lost. As Lily's life continued, she often returned to the forest where she had first met Spot. Each visit was a pilgrimage of sorts, a way to honor the bond that had shaped her life and to reconnect with the lessons she had learned as a child. She would sit beneath the oak tree, now taller and more majestic than ever, and let the memories wash over her. One crisp autumn morning, Lily brought her own daughter, Emma, to the forest for the first time. Emma was 5 years old, with the same wide-eyed curiosity that Lily had once had. As they walked through the woods, Emma asked endless questions about the trees, the animals, and the sounds around them. "Mommy, do you think we'll see a deer?" Emma asked, her voice filled with excitement. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "Maybe," she said. "The forest is full of surprises." As they reached the edge of the meadow, Lily knelt beside Emma and pointed toward the trees. "This is where I met Spot," she said softly. "He was just a baby deer, like the ones we read about in the story." Emma's eyes widened. "The real Spot?" Lily nodded. "He taught me so much about love, trust, and the importance of taking care of nature. And now I get to share those lessons with you." The two of them sat beneath the oak tree, the same spot where Lily and Spot had once played. As Emma listened to her mother's stories, she felt a sense of wonder and connection that would stay with her forever. And though Spot was long gone, his legacy continued to grow, touching new hearts and inspiring new generations. In the quiet of the forest, Lily closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Spot, for everything." And as the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and leaves, Lily felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that the bond she had shared with Spot would live on, not just in her heart, but in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by their story. As Lily and Emma sat beneath the towering oak tree, the forest seemed to hum with life. The sound of rustling leaves, chirping birds, and the distant babble of a stream created a symphony of nature that wrapped around them like a comforting embrace. Emma leaned against her mother, clutching a small notebook where she had drawn pictures of deer and trees. "Do you think Spot ever had a baby deer?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice tinged with curiosity. Lily smiled, her heart warming at the thought. "I like to think so," she said. "And maybe one of those baby deer has wandered through this forest, just like Spot did when I was your age." Emma's eyes lit up. "Do you think they would visit us, like Spot did?" "Maybe," Lily replied. "But even if they don't, Spot's spirit is all around us. It's in the trees, the flowers, and every deer that calls this forest home. That's the magic of nature, It's all connected, Emma nodded thoughtfully, her small fingers tracing the edges of a leaf she had picked up. I think I'd like to meet a deer someday, just like you met Spot. Lily kissed the top of her daughter's head, a deep sense of gratitude filling her heart. I hope you do, sweetheart. And when that day comes, I know you'll be just as kind and brave as Spot was. As the years passed, Emma grew up hearing stories about Spot and the incredible bond her mother had shared with the baby deer. These stories became a cherished part of her childhood, shaping her love for animals and the natural world. Like her mother, Emma spent hours exploring the woods near their home, searching for signs of wildlife and marveling at the beauty of the forest. One summer afternoon, when Emma was 8 years old, she ran into the house with her face flushed with excitement. Mom, come quick, she called, tugging at Lily's hand. What is it, Emma? Lily asked, setting down the book she had been reading. There's a deer in the backyard, Emma exclaimed. And it's a baby, just like Spot. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she followed Emma outside. Sure enough, standing near the edge of the woods was a small fawn, its legs wobbly and its coat speckled with white spots. The sight brought a rush of memories flooding back, and for a moment, Lily felt as though she were looking at Spot all over again. Emma approached the fawn slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. Hi there, she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. I'm Emma. The fawn tilted its head, its dark eyes watching her curiously. It took a hesitant step forward, then another, until it was close enough for Emma to reach out and touch its soft fur. Lily watched from a distance, her heart swelling with pride and joy. It was as if the forest had come full circle, bringing another moment of connection and magic into their lives. She smiled, knowing that this was more than just a chance encounter. It was a continuation of the legacy that had begun with Spot. Over the next few days, the fawn, whom Emma named Dot for the spots on its coat, became a regular visitor to the backyard. Emma took great care to follow the lessons her mother had taught her about respecting wildlife. She never tried to keep Dot from returning to the forest, and she always approached the fawn with quiet patience and kindness. Lily often watched from the porch, marveling at how similar Emma's bond with Dot was to her own bond with Spot. She's just like you, Sarah said one afternoon when she came to visit. It's amazing how these things have a way of repeating themselves. Lily nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. It feels like Spot's spirit is still here, guiding us. As Emma grew older, she developed a deep passion for wildlife conservation, just like her mother. She joined Lily in her work with forest friends, helping to organize events and teach children about the importance of protecting nature. Together, they traveled to schools, community centers, and even international conferences, sharing their story and inspiring others to make a difference. At one event, Emma stood on stage beside her mother, addressing a room full of eager listeners. When my mom was a little girl, she met a deer named Spot, she began. That friendship changed her life, and it eventually changed mine too. Spot taught us that even the smallest connections can have a big impact. The audience erupted into applause, and Lily couldn't help but beam with pride. Emma was carrying on the legacy of Spot in a way that was uniquely her own, and it filled Lily with hope for the future. One autumn afternoon, many years later, Lily and Emma returned to the forest where it all began. The oak tree was still there, its branches stretching high into the sky, and the meadow was as beautiful as ever. The two of them sat beneath the tree, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow over the landscape. Do you think Spot would recognize me now? Lily asked, her voice soft. Emma smiled. I think he'd be proud of you, of everything you've done. Lily reached for her daughter's hand, holding it tightly. And I think he'd be proud of you too. You're continuing his legacy in ways I could have never imagined. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as a small group of deer emerged from the forest to graze in the meadow. Among them was a young fawn, its spots bright against its coat. The sight brought tears to Lily's eyes, and she felt a deep sense of peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily whispered, "Thank you, Spot, for everything." And though the forest was quiet, she felt an answer in her heart. A gentle, unspoken reminder that some bonds are never broken. The story of Spot and Lily continued to inspire generations, becoming a symbol of the profound connection between humans and nature. Through their work with forest friends and the stories they shared, Lily and Emma ensured that Spot's legacy would live on, touching the hearts of countless people around the world. In the end, it wasn't just a story about a baby deer and a little girl. It was a story about love, trust, and the power of second chances. A reminder that even the smallest moments of kindness can ripple out to create something truly unforgettable.